Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Seattle is in the throes of a stunning and unprecedented affordable housing and homelessness crisis. Seattle needs rent control. Our city has been the construction crane capital of the nation for 4 years running. Construction has been booming. The for-profit construction boom has resulted in the perversion wherein working families who want to live in Seattle are forced out due to unaffordable rents, while the city's apartments have a 10% vacancy rate. The for-profit market, dominated by real estate speculators, corporate developers, and big landlords, has failed us. The logic of the for-profit market implies that it is more profitable for the capitalist class to have rental apartments vacant for extended periods than to bring rents down such that they are affordable to working people. The Mandatory Housing Affordability Program, or the MHA program, which has been much touted by the Democrats on the City Council, generates a small number of affordable homes through allowing for-profit developers to increase the height of buildings in return for providing some affordability. Every new affordable home is important. I have supported the MHA program. But because MHA relies on what is acceptable to big business, the amount of affordability eked out is sparse. There is to date no accounting of the existing affordable homes that are being lost as we speak as a result of the demolitions and renovations with or without MHA. Upzoning and increased density is necessary in order to expand urban housing and increase sustainability, but upzoning in itself, even through MHA, is obviously not going to make a dent in the serious housing crisis. There is a strong agreement among working people throughout the city that the political establishment has failed to address this crisis. As the housing crisis worsens and the city's political establishment gets increasingly called out for it, even the Seattle Times had to openly acknowledge that under a for-profit regime, quote, rents are never going to plummet back to the days when you could get a sweet spot on Capitol Hill for $1,000 a month. It might be wishful thinking to hope for rents to drop more than a little, since that virtually never happens, unquote. As long as housing is a commodity for making eye-popping profits for the bosses, the capitalists, the housing crisis will never be solved and will be exacerbated. We need a bold and comprehensive approach to matching the scale of the problem, a policy program that puts people over profit. We need rent control. We need a massive expansion of social housing funded by taxing Amazon and other big businesses. In response to grassroots organizing on rent control in the 1970s, the real estate lobby, with the loyalty of both the Democratic and Republican parties, succeeded in passing a statewide ban on residential rent control in 1981, which banned cities like Seattle from carrying out rent control. The Democratic Party currently has a majority in both the State House and Senate, along with the governor's mansion. Yet, they did not even propose to lift the ban on rent control this legislative session. There is nothing blocking the state government from lifting that ban today, except that the Democratic establishment is beholden to corporate real estate interests. We cannot wait for the Democratic politicians in Olympia to act and keep giving Seattle's Democratic establishment that perennial excuse for inaction. That is why my office and our movement for housing justice is putting forward a proposed ordinance for a comprehensive citywide rent control ordinance free of corporate loopholes that would take effect the moment the statewide ban on rent regulation is lifted. Building a fighting movement to win rent control in Seattle this year, effective the moment the state ban is repealed, will put immense pressure on Olympia to repeal the ban. We saw the momentum that rent control got in 2015 when Councilmember Nick Licata and I debated against the right wing. That same year, my office put forward a resolution urging the state legislature to lift the ban. That 2015 resolution was voted for unanimously by the then City Council. Just last week, the City of Seattle Renters Commission, some of whose members are here with us today in personal capacity, voted to, quote, urge the City Council take action in line with their 2015 resolution supporting a repeal of the statewide rent control ban by passing an ordinance within the next 3 months to implement rent control in Seattle, effective whenever that state ban is lifted, unquote. In other words, the City of Seattle Renters Commission is exactly on the same page as my office and our movement. We want to tell the City Council they will no longer be able to pass the buck. This will also clarify what our movement means by rent control, but we will need to build a serious fighting movement to win this. We know the Oregon state just passed rent control. As we speak, renters and housing activists in Colorado are fighting to push the state legislature to repeal the ban. We are not alone. My office also joins the City of Seattle Renters Commission in demanding that the City Council require landlords to provide a 180-day notice for any rent increase. My office will be looking into this idea and potentially bringing forward an ordinance, and I thank all members of the Renters Commission for showing such important leadership in the face of this crisis. Please, I wanted to also draw your attention to our one-pager on rent control. I would urge the media and everybody who's here to look at this because it has some of the basic ideas that we will be bringing forward. If you turn on the flip side, we have a summary of what that policy would be. It would be a policy that was free of corporate loopholes. So in other words, one, the rent may not increase any more than the rate of inflation. We will be joining cities like Los Angeles, which already have such a policy in place. The effective date would be moment the state ban is lifted. All residential rental homes will be covered. In other words, no loopholes. If you're renting a space in a single-family home, if you're renting a condominium, if you're renting an apartment in a rental apartment building, no matter what, rent control should apply. We also want a rent control policy that is free of yet another loophole. The loophole is called vacancy decontrol. In other words, our policy will have vacancy control. What does this mean? It means that all rental homes will remain rent controlled between tenants and do not go back to market rate rents when a tenant moves out. This has been a common loophole. This has been a common loophole that the real estate lobby has viciously fought for and won in many cities. In fact, in California, a very destructive policy that was put forward at the state level by Democrats and Republicans called the Costa-Hawkins Act. Costa was a Democrat, Hawkins was a Republican. They included this loophole. We want to make sure that loophole is not in place because we want to make sure everybody has access to rent control and that you don't have to be one of the lucky few who has access to a rent-controlled apartment. We also demand that there be one-to-one replacement. In other words, redevelopment must replace demolished rent-controlled homes at rent-controlled rates.